Good evening. Welcome to MUFON Los Angeles. My name's Steve Murillo. I'm the State Section Director for MUFON LA. We have a very, very interesting program tonight. Jim Moroney is going to be talking about UFOs, alien abductions, and the coming ET presence. Much has been written about the extraterrestrial presence on Earth. Every conceivable angle of investigation has been covered extensively except the most crucial one. What does the extraterrestrial presence mean for the human race? Why are these visitors here? And how should we respond? Tonight, our speaker, Jim Moroney, is going to combine a gripping account of his own abduction experiences with invaluable advice on how we should respond to the growing extraterrestrial presence, from the individual level to the governmental and society-wide level. Drawing on 25 years of research, Jim will try to clarify why the visitors are here and what they are trying to do and the potential ramifications for our world. Jim Moroney is an accomplished public speaker and a grounded professional educator. He manages the Alberta UFO Study Group and has recently completed a book called The Extraterrestrial Answer Book, UFOs, Alien Abductions, and the Coming ET Presence. I read the book and I highly recommend it. It's a great book. In his career as a health and safety professional, Jim Moroney is a full-time executive director for the Alberta Municipal Health and Safety Association. Jim's goal is to inform the public about the reality of the UFO phenomenon and provide a basis for informed social action. Jim's own abduction experiences in the summer of 1987 left him in no doubt as to the reality of alien civilizations. After much reflection and study, Jim is convinced that it is time for human society to develop a thoughtful and careful crafted response to the daunting and mysterious phenomenon currently known as the ET presence on Earth. If you would, put your hands together and give Jim a warm welcome. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Wow. That's a glorious introduction, isn't it? Holy smokes, I hope I can live up to it. I'm really excited to be here. And I want to thank MUFON for the invitation to come down here and speak with you. It's been a dream of mine. I was actually mentioning to somebody else for many years about coming to California and actually making this particular talk. It seems unusual that that would be one of those things I would think about, but it is such an engaging topic. It's such an engaging subject for all of us. And I want you to understand that your presence here is absolutely important, because you're actually demonstrating an interest in the phenomena that helps support the continued investigation into this area. And without your support, this wouldn't happen. I mean, we wouldn't have these meetings here. We wouldn't be able to bring in speakers with different ideas about what's happening in the phenomenon. It's absolutely critical that we do something actually to try and improve our understanding about what's happening. So I'm Jim Moroney, and I've been abducted by aliens. Now, you don't get across the border saying that, I can assure you. So, in fact, when I was going through security, the person asked me, they said, so what are you going to LA for? I went, I'm going to talk about what? About UFOs? Really? Yes. And what's your job? I'm in health and safety. I'm an executive director. What does that have to do with UFOs? Nothing. Get out of here. Go. So even today, you know, I still feel somewhat reluctant actually to talk about the whole subject on the UFO phenomenon, particularly my personal experiences on it. And I was engaging a conversation with my mom and my dad, who are still around. And they said, you know, Jim, things that people want to hear about the most are usually the most difficult to talk about. And this came about just in Remembrance Day when I was talking to my dad. And I'd always be asking him questions about his experience in the Second World War. And he's always reluctant to talk about it, but I was always interested in it. And I thought very similar to my situation that I'd be talking to you this evening about my experiences regarding the UFO phenomenon. And you're probably sitting in your chairs wondering, you know, how's this guy really going to come across? You know, is this guy stable or is he not? And I think that's a really pertinent question for yourselves, because there are people who claim alien abduction experiences who don't have them. So who's going to tell you who to believe? Well, really nobody. You have to make that determination for yourself. And it's not an easy determination. So I'll get into the story in just one little minute, but I want you to understand that I still do have a sense of humor about the whole thing. I mean, you have to, right, if you're going to get through this. And my experience is both positive and negative. I think there's a great deal of stress associated with the experience, obviously, as you can imagine, but there's ultimately a good story at the end of this. And so I'm not one that's going to, bash the whole idea of UFO contact and say the aliens are all bad and they're all evil. I'm just not going to jump on that bandwagon. I can't, because I know that's not true. But I'm certainly completely compassionate and understanding for those who are struggling to understand their experiences, because it's not an easy thing to go through. So a little bit about what I think. I think that it's really no longer a point in time in our history where we have to consider whether or not, or how we're going to contact extraterrestrials and interact with them. The real question, the absolute real question, is how they have decided to interact with us. Now that's a big question. And that's a question that tonight we're going to try and answer. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer all of your questions. I'm probably going to create more questions than answers. But it's important that when we are at the very cutting edge of this incredible journey, that we have to understand that we're going to have differences of opinion. So if you don't agree with me, that's okay. I'm not here to convince you to take on my belief systems, because our belief systems are structured in a way based largely upon our own personal experiences. And granted, my personal experiences are different than yours. So it's only natural that we're going to have different ideas. It's only natural. And we can still exist with each other and be friends with each other and be compassionate with each other and still have those differences in our understanding. Now, I had this experience when I was driving between Edmonton and a little place called Sarnia, Ontario, pretty much smack dab in the middle of the continent. And it's a long, long drive, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3,000 miles. But I had a premonition in this drive that something was going to happen. And I thought I was kind of excited about it and kind of not so excited about it. And that premonition was that I might actually have contact with some extraterrestrials. Now, up to this point in time, I really felt that extraterrestrials in most cases were everything that we saw on TV, right? Like on Star Trek or something along those lines. I actually kind of figured they'd be pretty much like us, just more technologically advanced. But the reason why I had this premonition was because of an experience I had during meditation, where a being, not human, came to me in that meditation and left me with an overwhelming sense of love. I'm not going to get into all of the details of it, but it was an incredible feeling. And it was that sense of love that I'd never felt before from anybody or anything, that I realized that this was a real experience and that this was a real being that was in contact with me. The reason why I'd taken up meditation was just basically to heal some soft tissue injuries that I had from a vehicle accident. So when I was on this little trip, this idea of this premonition and this experience that I had with this being kept coming stronger and stronger and stronger. And my courage started to wane. So at about, as the night grew darker and the road grew longer, Jim's courage just went down the tubes. So if you think I'm a courageous guy, I got to tell you, I'm not. I don't consider myself to be courageous. I just consider myself a person who believes in doing the right thing. And maybe if I was courageous, I would have spoken up a lot sooner. But it took me a long, long time before I would come forward to even decide to write the book, because it has implications on your personal life as well, obviously. So I pulled into this little truck stop, and if you Google map it, it's on Deacon's Corner, and it's just off the major highway of Highway 1. Now, the reason why I pulled in there and not a hotel was because I wanted to be near people. I felt more comfortable around people. This excitement and idea that I might meet extraterrestrials suddenly started to change to a feeling of dread. And this dread was all-encompassing. It took me to about 2 o'clock in the morning before I was so absolutely exhausted from driving that I decided I'd pull in. I parked approximately in this location, and right here is actually a restaurant. So it's clear view from the people in the restaurant to where I was parking. And I felt fairly comfortable. I thought for a minute I was going to park over in this location. At the time it was gravel. It's actually been paved since then. But I couldn't actually park there. It was just too far away from everybody. So I thought I would park in a more in an area that was a little bit more visible. But the little buggers got me anyway. I'll say that much. So this was the car I was driving at the time. Okay, it's not the exact replica of the car, but it's actually a 1987 Honda Civic. The reason why I wanted to show it to you was because it actually came with a sunroof. If you can believe it, it came with a sunroof. And the craft that I was taken upon, maybe I'll go back to this one just in a little bit, but what the amazing thing is, and it became so difficult to believe, and I'm going to tell you a story that is hard to believe. You know, if I was sitting in your chairs right now listening to a guy up here talking about his experience, there would be levels of doubt that would creep in. And I'm telling you, it is completely natural, because even after this experience, I had levels of doubt. And this happened to me. So, you know, but I'm going to go through it anyway. What the beings were able to do, and I'm just going to summarize in a very general way, they somehow influenced a driver in a transport truck to park his rig in such a way that it would basically block everybody's view from what was going to happen with me in the car. And now this accounts for some pretty sophisticated work on their part. They obviously determined where I was. They knew where I was, and this was actually a planned encounter. This was not a chance encounter. I think that the vast majority of encounters that we hear about today are likely chance encounters, but what's really happening, I think, are the more planned, sophisticated encounters that are actually going on with individuals. So this was actually a very detailed, very well orchestrated move, I would suppose, on these extraterrestrials' part. And so they obviously had surveillance of the area. They obviously contacted, somehow connected with a driver, influenced the driver to park his rig in that location. And they also decided, obviously, to take myself and the vehicle that I was in into their craft, which also creates a whole pile of other questions, like why did they do that? Did they know that it would be not a good idea to leave the vehicle there unattended? You know, why did they take the vehicle in the craft? And if they could take the vehicle in craft, did they take vehicles fairly regularly in their craft? I'd have to say they obviously take their vehicles pretty regularly into craft, because where I found myself was essentially in what would I call an auditorium. And the steps of the auditorium were somewhere in the neighborhood of about maybe 3-4 inches high. There was indirect lighting that was in there. It was a really bright area, really brightly lit. It wasn't dim in any way, and it wasn't organic in any way. It was like a hospital is probably the way I would actually describe it. But part of the experience was obviously influenced by the fact that these beings had control over my mental state. And I found myself standing beside my car, essentially trying to get my wits about me. And I was stumbling because one minute I was lying down in that car. I actually went over to the passenger seat, put the passenger seat back. So one minute I'm there, and the next minute, essentially 30 seconds later, I am standing beside my car, staggering, holding onto with my left hand onto the car roof. And in front of me were 4 non-distinct human beings. In other words, they were alien in, appearance. Now, the fact that I got into their ship so quickly, I don't understand how that happened. But I will tell you this much, it was damn painful. So I didn't recall all of these memories. So I'm just going to save you part of that journey about where I had to go back through hypnotic regression and recount some of these memories. So essentially they took me to a location where I could actually step into a booth, hit with a blast of light, which was essentially meant for decontamination, I'm guessing, or I'm assuming. One of the creatures that was there, I call them creatures, man, I shouldn't be saying that. I should tell you how it really happened. I was pretty pissed off at them, as you can imagine. And I was scared. right? So if you're scared, what do? And you can't run. Okay, there's no place to run and you're scared. So I'm going to get all tough, right? I'm going to bolster myself up and say, here, you little bastards, don't you put your hands on me. Stay away from me. And I was pretty angry at this point in time because I was scared. And as I became more and more agitated, one of the beings stepped forward and said in perfect clarity in English, something to the effect of, why are you angry? And I'm like, what? And then instantly I was calm. Now, I think another being or that being actually had an influence over my emotional state and was actually able to calm me down. We went over to, we went basically through that decontamination area, and then we went through a number of medical procedures. Now I know. I know what the news media, right? Jim, were you ever anal probed? Look, guys, I have no idea if I was anal probed, But in truth, right? The sophisticated medical procedures that I was exposed to were pretty darn difficult. I played a lot of sports in my life, and I got to tell you, man, I've had lots of injuries and lots of pains, but nothing like that. I was quite certain that I wasn't going to survive. And feeling myself in one particular situation when I was lying down, I could feel that I could start getting all my senses back, like I wasn't being encouraged by them in any way. And I got to tell you, I just started crying. I just broke out crying. And I was crying because of the enormity of the experience, and the understanding and the reality started crushing into my psyche. It was something I was totally unprepared for. None of this really should have happened. Later on, I was ushered into I would describe as an auditorium. Think of a gymnasium, maybe a gymnasium. And this ship was damn big. And in this gymnasium-sized area, there was probably a neighborhood of 70 beds. And on the 70 beds, there was probably 30 or 40 people on them. Now, all the people appeared to be sleeping, but they were all in different dress. I distinctly remember somebody in a nightgown and a person with a plaid shirt. Even today, while I'm telling you this, I can actually see it in my mind. And I remember the feeling that, oh God, I don't want to be seeing this, which is unusual, because you would think that a person who's in an alien environment, that nothing's familiar with them, that when they see another human being, they should be gloriously excited by this reality and of friendship and kinship. No. The fact is that everybody was paralyzed. Nobody was moving. If had anybody sat up and screamed, God knows what I would have done. I just didn't want to see it. I remember that distinctly. Well, this was unusual for me because during my whole experience, I was trying to analyze every little detail that I was seeing on the ship. My background's in health and safety. I spent a lot of time going through workers' environments and evaluating worker environments for hazards. This makes me particularly adept at evaluating the environmental conditions, I would say, because that's what I do for a living for years. And what I noticed were a couple of astonishing things. Number one, they could speak English. Now, you didn't need to be an environmental scientist to realize that's pretty extraordinary, but the implications are pretty significant. There are it's been estimated, anywhere from 3,000 to 8,000 languages on Earth. Why in the world would they be able to speak English to me? Secondly, when we were walking through the area, I noticed that the size of the ship was anthropometrically perfect for human beings. It was not for their size. In other words, their sizes, typically the ones I first saw were anywhere from 4 feet to 4.5 feet tall, maybe 3.5 feet tall, somewhere in that neighborhood. So as I was walking through, I'm thinking, this is just perfect for human beings. Of course, the reality quickly hit me that, in fact, the ship was, in fact, designed to deal with human beings. It wasn't designed to deal with them. I mean, that's what you do in your design phase anyway. So even though I hadn't seen anybody when I was making that deduction, it was amazing to me just the effort that was being made on their part to deal with human beings. when in the gymnasium, I'd been asked to lie down on a table. I had done so, and it's just something you do, and they just advise you to do it. You just go ahead and do it. I know it sounds a bit odd, but think of going to see a hypnotist, and the hypnotist can actually give suggestions to somebody, and they just do crazy things on stage. This is very similar to the experience that I had, and I think that many, many other people have. There's just a suggestion that's given, and it seems like the right thing to do, and you just do it. At one point in time, I'd passed out, and I think it was, I'm sure it was a result of some of the medical procedures that I was undergoing. And it was so intense that the pain, I just blacked out. I just passed out. So when I came to, there were a number of beings around me. In fact, there was 2 beings at the edge of my bed. They were about 8, 9, maybe 9 feet, 10 feet tall, somewhere in that neighborhood. They had black uniforms. They were essentially identical in structure to all the other alien beings that I'd seen. They were just a whole lot bigger. In fact, I'd never seen any beings that big in my entire life, obviously. I'd never seen anything living that size that can walk on 2 legs. And it was pretty intimidating, to say the least. And over to my right, the smaller beings, which were dressed in white lab coats, pulled back, and another being stepped forward and said in perfect English, "We don't understand your anger." And I thought to myself, what? It's like waking up, right, with the alarm going. I'm like, turn off the alarm, I'm like, what? I'm still trying to orientate myself, just what in the hell is happening to me? And she was quite insistent, and there was a mannequin kind of quality. I couldn't perceive any emotions from this being at all. She says, "Well, we don't understand your anger." And I'm like, what? We don't understand your anger. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I was actually trying to communicate with these little buggers. I really was. And I had lost it at one point. I got really angry with them. And I thought, that's what they must be thinking about. And I thought, now some people question me as to the logic of doing this. And I'll take you back a little bit. If you're in a situation that you believe that your life is in danger, then you better screw your head on tight. And you better make decisions that might seem unusual at the time, but you're not there to be a proud person. You're there to get out of there alive. And I thought my only way to get out of there alive was to try and understand them. That's it. It's as simple as that. So, forget about the courageous Jim thing or anything else. I was trying to get out of there alive. And I said, look, I'm sorry for getting angry. I just wasn't expecting it to hurt, is what I wanted to say. And all I got out was, I'm sorry. And then this huge emotional thing just welled up within inside me. And I turned away and I said, and I tried to get out, I just wasn't expecting it to hurt, but all I could get out was, I'm sorry. And you get that big watermelon lump in your throat. And then I just burst out crying and fell into the arms of this alien being who was now emitting this enormous, intense love and compassion. And she held me in her arms, and I held on to her for dear life, and I cried like a baby. And she said, "Go ahead and cry. The strong ones cry." So, to me, after I got some composure, she started to talk to me, and that's all I remember. I don't exactly remember what she said to me, I don't remember how she said it, and I don't remember the details of that particular conversation. So goes it with some of these experiences with other abductees or contactees. But when we left as they were the best friends I've ever had in my life. They were buddies. They were intimate friends. And this being really emitted this sense of, I gave her a hug again before I left. I was standing beside the car, and there was a friendship quality almost, there's also a great sadness that was associated with this experience now. And I remember saying, look, actually, the being said to me, she says, "I wish I could stand beside you to face the things that you're going to have to face." And I said, "No, it's okay, I understand." That's just the way I felt. My place wasn't there, though part of me wanted to stay there. So what I began to understand was, number one, that everything was planned on their part. Part of it was they had to do the medical procedures because they had to do them. And the other part of it is they wanted to find out who Jim Moroney really was, what Jim Moroney was all about. I'll call it the initiating event because it became apparent that they'd been in contact with me prior to that particular experience. It was only that they decided that they wanted me to remember. And they decided when they wanted me to remember. So in fact, as I look out into the crowd, and I look at you guys, it's quite reasonable and quite rational to anticipate that any of you, or all of you, may have actually already had contact with these beings. That's a pretty sobering reality, but this is an ultimate reality. And you may not remember them, or you don't remember them. And you know what? That's totally cool. I'm no different than you. I just had, they just decided that, hey, Jim, it's time for you to get to know what we're about and that we exist. It took me a long time to kind of integrate those ideas and that reality into my life. I went on to get married, but it impacts things. When I'm sitting there and I'm going to marry this beautiful woman, I'm in love with her, she's got 2 kids, and what the hell am I bringing into the relationship? Because this contact experience wasn't over. This was going to be an ongoing thing in my life. So now I was exposing somebody I loved to a phenomenon I didn't quite understand. That's a fact. And therefore, I would be possibly exposing her to some risk, and the kids as well. So what do? Do I even tell her? Do I even tell her? Do I risk losing this relationship that's so important to me over a story? But I felt that it's my obligation to do so. If she's willing to accept my story, I hadn't even told her before. It's not something you start off with on a first date, right? Unless you want to really end your date really quick, and I've been on a few of those. But so it's one of those things that it impacts your life, no doubt about it. And when I did tell her, she just said, "Look, Jim, I don't understand everything, but I love you, and I believe what you're telling me is the truth, and we'll just, we'll tackle this thing together." And I wasn't using her as a crutch. It wasn't like, "Oh my God, my life is falling apart, I need to hold on." No way, man. And women, don't ever marry a guy who's like that. When you got 2 kids, you don't need a third one, right? So that's essentially it, right? She needs a strong man in her life. She needs someone who's going to take responsibility. She needs someone who's going to have a stable career. And then she needs, most importantly, she needs a good man, she needs a good husband, and she needs a great dad for those kids. Well, that's the priorities in my life. That's absolutely the priorities in my life. So the UFO phenomenon, yeah, it's important, because I know it's important. And it does bother me at times when I see people saying things about the phenomena that I know are not true, that I know are not going to be conducive to our understanding in it. But ultimately, I also understand that we will know a lot more about these beings within the next 20 years. This is not something that's going to be for the next generation. This is our generation. And I see the numbers out here. We are a small, eclectic group of people, right? We are. But I'm telling you right now, the world needs you in ways that you don't even know yet. That much, I can guarantee it. This phenomenon itself is presenting itself to us because of a crisis that's coming. It's a crisis that's man-made to some extent, but it's a crisis nonetheless. I don't see us resolving this issue about whether the aliens are good or bad. It's a fundamental reality of human nature. There's going to be part of us that are going to hate them. There's going to be some that want to kill them. And there'll be those who say they're the best thing since sliced bread and that we should have great relationships with them. My experience is a bit of somewhere in the middle. This experience is so difficult that if someone said, "Do you want to have an experience with aliens?" I would think very carefully about it. It's a tough experience. Because we're not dealing with what's nice. We're not dealing with what is good. we are dealing with something that has to happen. Because without it, I don't believe humanity is going to survive. So these beings have decided to have what I would define it as an intervention. So what we're dealing with then is an intervention. We're not dealing with contact here. So all bets are off. All bets are off. All the theories about contact don't apply. Start considering this as an intervention. It's forceful. It feels forced, and it certainly feels that way. What's intriguing about this phenomenon is that these beings are distinctly interested in you. I'll say that again. They have a distinct interest in you. That means they don't care about sitting around and meeting with the board of directors. God knows I do enough of that. And I've been in meetings, I'm sure you have, where you want to be anywhere else but the meeting, right? The meeting is just god awful. Get me out of this meeting, please, God, pull the fire alarm. In other words, meetings themselves transfer ideas and information, and pretty poorly at times. But if you get to know somebody intimately, really intimately, everything about them, then that is appealing. That's what a higher consciousness, a more evolved consciousness, is drawn to. It's drawn to individuals. And that's how the phenomenon has been unfolding. It's been unfolding because it's being drawn to individuals like you. Like me. I don't know why the timing is the way it is. I explained it to somebody, I said, you know what? I had mine 20 years ago because you know what? Because Jim is such a stubborn SOB that it would have taken him 20 years just to come to terms with the experience. It may take you a whole lot less longer than that. But maybe it's because I needed that amount of time just to get a sense of, keeping my feet grounded and being able to continue on in a productive life and a productive member of society. But it's not without its challenges, obviously. Some side effects include the things that you'd never think about. I don't think I'd gone to sleep at night for maybe 10 years, every single night thinking about, God, the little buggers are never going to come through my door. Are they going to show up in my bedroom? And that's something to live with, every single night. This is not something imaginary. This is something that's real. And I always question, how I would respond. Would I be good? Would I be the best part of humanity? Would I have the courage to do what needed to be done? Because what we're doing, folks, we're on the front lines of this. We are absolutely, you are on the front lines of this discovery. No question about it. Don't let anybody tell you different. And because we're such a small number of people, we are extremely important. We are the spearhead of this understanding that has to go and has to move forward. But how many people, right? How many people have actually been contacted? Frankly, we don't know the numbers. And we were discussing this on the way over here. And we don't really have good data on actually who's been contacted. But we do know that contact's coming. And what's interesting is that even though the mechanized world that we have around us and our industry and our technology has nowhere to compare to what's actually happening. And here's one of the challenges for us. Here's the thing. We tend to look at the UFO phenomena itself, the whole UFO stuff, from a technological standpoint. They can fly faster, they can move quicker, they can travel interstellar spaces, they have technology, it's crap. Because when you have a one-on-one encounter, technology is the least of your worries. It's the least of the things that's floating through your mind, I can assure you. One of the ways they love to communicate, if I had to communicate with you some ideas about my life experiences or something I wanted you to understand, I would have to talk to you like I'm doing now. And there's a lot of limitations to being able to talk like that. What they do is they have the ability to link with your mind and take you to a place and experience something with you. And that means, think of it this way. Think of it as suddenly finding yourself in a dream, but it's not a dream, it's real. And you're there with a friend, and you're seeing something, or you're observing something. And that's how they teach. That's one of the reasons it's one of the ways they communicate. So I think it's a phenomenal way to basically break the barriers between wherever they come from and where we are right now. Their sense, this is from me, their sense that they gave to me is that humanity is in fact spiritually retarded, for lack of a better term. Right? I can't think of a better term than that because that just defines it. Our technology has simply outpaced our spiritual development. And they see and they perceive a real problem within our lifetime. And that's why they're here. They're trying to intercede in a way we don't fully understand yet to help prevent a major crisis. Now, to that extent, I have to tell you a major crisis is likely coming anyway, but our survival will likely determine whether or not, what you do. Not what I do exclusively, but I know that your actions are going to determine really the outcome of humanity over the next 20 or 30 years and beyond. So their sense is that they want humanity with them. But here's something that's intriguing. Like nothing is, right? But here's another intriguing note. Since they're linked with individuals, they don't care about governments. Well, that's going to present one heck of a problem for any governments that are developing policies around how to deal with extraterrestrials when they don't actually want to go through, a strip search at a border. Right? They don't have to go and get visas. They're certainly not accommodating our rules around airspace. Right? So why would they start now? They're not going to. They don't see it in those terms. We say that we own this planet. We don't own this planet. Not from their perspective. Right? Not from their perspective. So if they don't see that we have ownership, then what do they see? How do they interact with us? It's our perceptions that need to change. That's one of the big problems. One of the many big problems that's going to happen. A little bit about some of my background and my technical background in science and research. This is myself actually looking at a particular operation at one of the plants and essentially assessing from health hazards. Here's, I was going to compare that. I think I'm at Sarah Palin's house on this one, right? But this was actually, yeah. I don't know why they put this particular one actually in the middle, but this is myself accepting some governmental awards. So I work actually with the government right now in a lot of extensive programs. And so I have an insight to how government actually works. And believe me, they're not nearly as diabolical maybe as some people might think. But there's a lot of respectful people that I do know in the government. And I really think that we can move forward in a way that can help generate a lot of understanding with the government, because there's been some really critical things that have been missed. Just to give you a sense of my life as well, this is my daughter, and this is my son with some friends that we have as well. This is my motorcycle riding buddies that I go out with. And, I'm just really a regular guy, and this is my wife. So there's a lot of things that I do get involved with and that I have been involved with. In fact, I actually teach at the universities and colleges back in Canada. But I don't use this as a platform to promote myself in any way, shape, or form. Gosh, maybe I should, right? But there's some fundamental questions that we are still struggling with to answer today. And these include, who are they? What are they doing? What should we do? And how does this affect me? And then what will happen? Now, I have a pretty good idea after studying this for many, many years. And now I got to be honest with you. I'm basing it again on my personal experiences and extrapolating those personal experiences to what I see in the world around me. And I know that when we have great scientists like Fermi saying, you know what, the aliens should already be here, well, he's right. The aliens, in fact, are here. It's just that they're doing it in such a way that we never even predicted that it would happen in the way it is. And that's why we're trying to get our heads around it. I have 100% confidence and belief that we will make it. Guaranteed. I guarantee it. We're going to make it. But we're going to need to work together to be able to get there. So for that purpose, and there's a number of people that I'm just going to go through some slides through really quickly, with astronauts that have actually spoken up about the UFO phenomenon. Here's the thing that we have to consider tonight, and that is, what happens when they announce that the phenomenon is real? What are our plans then? Do we have any plans? Who's going to speak to the government about policy decisions that make sense? Right? Who's the government is going to be willing to listen to? And I mean the government. I'm talking municipal government or state government, or city governments, let alone federal governments. I think there's going to be a huge struggle in that process. I would like to see us start developing plans now to be able to work with the government in the future, because we're going to need to go down that road at some point in time. So what if the government is flailing around trying to figure out what to do? The last thing, I have seen government decisions and policies being made that were horrific when you started looking at it. They just didn't make sense. They didn't make sense because nobody was there to tell them to make the right decision. When the government runs to make decisions, they'll form policies that absolutely don't make sense. So we need to be in a situation, be prepared to at least advise the government on what policies should be made and how they should be made, so that we can have some transparency with respect to our whole investigation on the UFO phenomenon. Ultimately, it's not about me, right? It's about you. It really is. It's about you. It's about the people you love. It's about our future. It's about the future of our children and our grandchildren. It's a pretty heady kind of responsibility, I suppose, but I think it's one that we're all up to. I really believe that we have had an opportunity right in our hands right now to show the world what we can do. I've noticed that the phenomenon itself can be studied in 15-year cycles. And what we know from stage 1 to stage 6 is that we can see it goes from a surveillance stage from pre-1945, but when we started using nuclear weapons, the phenomenon really became, more prominent. It's because the aliens began to realize, holy crap, the kids discovered the lighter, right? They're now running around the house with lighters. Oh my God. We got to do something. I don't believe they're going to just come in and say, you know what, we're just going to take your weapons away, now play nice. Because it's not the problem, is it? It's our willingness to use the weapons. It's our need to have the weapons is the problem. So before 1945, just really quickly, with technologies possibly millions of years more advanced, of course the more intriguing question should be, why have they actually allowed themselves to be seen at all? So we have a lot of indications that these beings have been around for a long time. They have been probably studying us and integrating themselves in some way with the evolution of humanity. And I think it's been a great consternation when they've observed everything that's been going on. It strikes me funny when we start looking at the aliens as a threat. My God, a threat? Hey, we're still killing each other on this planet. And when the aliens have shown up, you know what? We've had the welcome wagon for them. Shoot them out of the sky. We've tried to do it. There's lots of records about us trying to shoot them out of the sky. Think of it this way. If they travel light years here, who's on board the ship? Women, children, kids, families? Welcome to Earth. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time, my dear. So we take out our pop guns and we try and shoot them out, right, out of the sky. We don't hurt them. Their technology is too advanced. But I can guarantee you that if there's any extraterrestrial beings in this universe, and there are, they got a big red warning sign around Earth. When you approach this atmosphere, look out. This is a violent species, this is a dangerous species, and they are in a very big transition period right now. So, where are we going to go? What's going to happen? No one really knows to this point in time, but we certainly have our threats among us. I don't understand even the entire outcome of this process, but I do know that we could make it a lot easier on ourselves if we understood it. Right now we spend a lot of money in military and warfare. And what are the beings seeing? Thousands of children, human beings dying each day as a result of starvation. So there's an imbalance in the world. There's no question there's a huge imbalance in this world. So here's the Ministry of Defense files as well, just to prove to you that we've actually tried to shoot them out of the sky. What was interesting is that the pilot who tried to shoot this one out, he had this enormous feeling of, oh my God, what am I doing? What am I going to do if I actually hit this thing? What have I done? So the question now becomes, are they good or are they bad? I guess it depends on your perception. Here I have a sense of going to the dentist. You know, someone says, you know, if these beings cause pain, they must be bad. Well, I go to a dentist and I don't consider my dentist bad. Well, not all the time, but I guess sometimes I do, right? I think considering that on that basis, it's very difficult. And I'll tell you right now, pain is going to be a part of it. Pain is a part of it because there's some kind of medical intervention that they're actually dealing with, which is a very intriguing concept to contemplate for a minute. Why is it that most contactees remember some kind of medical component to their experience? It's only one reason only, and that is because these beings want us to know. Next question. Why do these beings want us to know that medical part of it, this intervention, is important? Why? Because it has to do with the future. Yet even today, we have programs on TV that demonize the whole alien visitation process, and it's very easy to get caught up on. Some are really good films, and some are crap. But you know what? It's all entertainment, you know. Some are great horror films, in fact. But we have to be careful that they're not all documentaries, right? Now, our fearful and aggressive response to the whole ET presence, I think, is completely understandable. It's even predictable. But in many ways, I think it's a sad reflection of our current state of spiritual development, or rather, lack of it. In stage 2, from 1945 to 1960, these beings essentially ramped up their basic surveillance of military, particularly the military. I mean, they're really concerned with what's happening with the military, which makes the military paranoid about what's happening. So the military is never going to divulge something when they're already nervous about it. These beings have definitely shown a real interest in our military. The military that's designed to kill other human beings, right? It's a part of human conflict. So what I always find intriguing is that one of the most infamous experiences in the United States happened between around the UFO phenomenon, that is, happened between 1950 and 1953. This was a time of the Korean War. If anybody knows their history around the Korean War conflict, the United States at this time was debating about the use of nuclear weapons on Chinese cities because the Chinese had basically got themselves involved with the Korean War. And MacArthur was adamant that he wanted the use of these nuclear weapons to save American lives. Truman at the time was saying, hold on, we are not going down that road. Truman saw a greater reality, I would suppose. I'm not saying either one was wrong, but I'd just say that I think Truman was right. So, and isn't that a political way of saying things, isn't it? But by 1952, Washington actually had the flyovers of UFOs. Fascinating. The extraterrestrials, I believe, were sending a message. And of course, Truman went on to say that he believed that the UFO phenomenon was absolutely real. So in the third stage, from 1960 to 1975, and I'll get to our stage, but we have a number of abductions that start taking place from people recounting abduction experiences. And again, we start seeing more and more objects, even some very unusual objects actually in the sky. We have some incredible ones that came from the United States with respect to abduction reports. And these two gentlemen, both Charlie Hickson and Calvin Parker, have never changed their stories from their experience. And these are the kinds of beings that they saw. So we know there's multiple beings out there. There's different kinds of beings, obviously. I don't know how many there are. I don't think anybody does. But we have to assume there's more than one species that's actually being involved with humanity. But at least one of those species, how many there are, has taken a lead role in dealing with us. In 1975 to 1990, during this period, we saw a real increase in actual abductions. We had what I would call a very unusual abduction experience. This is not your traditional abduction. Something went a little bit haywire in this particular instance, and Travis Walton had his experience. I got to tell you, I shook Travis Walton's hand a couple of months back, and it was there was something there. Like when I shook his hand, it was maybe a feeling of calmness or just an intimacy, knowing that there was another human being that went through some of this, some experience similar to mine. Different than mine, obviously, but somewhat similar. It was almost a sense of, you know what, we can both survive this. It's kind of like maybe what I thought to myself. So what I think is chance encounters are really the very tip of the iceberg, but the planned encounters, the ones that are detailed, the ones that are being executed by these extraterrestrials, by far and away outweigh all these other chance encounters. So we may not have a really good picture of what is actually happening. We also have a lot of abduction stories and a lot of abduction books that have come out since that point in time. And contact with individuals is obviously paramount. I believe that it's reasonably aware to assume that the ETs are well aware of the different social governing systems on Earth. It's equally likely that these highly evolved beings would have a governance system that has little in their hierarchical structure and may in fact have nothing that resembles any of our existing primitive governance models. If true, this would present a significant challenge to any world government, right? I think this is the reality that we're going to be dealing with. From 1990 to 2005, we have massive UFO sightings over cities. Military officials start acknowledging the UFO phenomenon is real. We have encounters with extraterrestrials that are increasing, and the reports of abduction start increasing. And we have some phenomenal photographs now and films of extraterrestrial craft. It's becoming more ingrained in the social culture of our world that this is a real phenomenon and that it's okay to talk about it. We even have military officials stepping forward, pointing out the details of what they're actually observing, and even then they're reluctant to say that they're extraterrestrial craft. But again, why are the extraterrestrials so secretive? Well, I think it has to do with the idea that when you're interacting with them, you get a sense of why they're secretive. They're not here to inhibit and completely mollycoddle humanity. We're not going to get out of this without a bloody nose. So we have to learn on our own. They're giving us an opportunity to basically fix this world. And they're going to give us that opportunity. But they are not going to stop millions of people from dying. They are not going to stop planes from flying into buildings. They are not going to stop wars. And that's clear. If they wanted to, they could have done that. So, I think it's going to be a very difficult relationship at first. But it's certainly very fragile. It's probably the best way I could describe the relationship. And of course, in Mexico has obviously reported a number of sightings pretty significant. And then from 2005 to 2020, I don't want to go too long for you guys, but I'm just getting to the point of where we are right now. And what's really incredible is that we're smack dab here at 2010, pretty much in the middle of this whole transition process. And I really believe that what we're going to be seeing is a new side of this phenomenon, a new part of it that we have to be aware of. I'm not sure, I'm going to talk a little bit about alien implants and stuff like this. Now they exist, they absolutely exist. But one of the problems that I've seen nothing that has convinced me that anybody has an extraterrestrial alien implant. Inherently, believe it or not, folks, I'm a skeptic. I am, and it's not a bad thing. You should be a skeptic too, about what people tell you. But really, when I looked at all the evidence that I'd seen, nothing impressed me to say that, my God, this is an extraterrestrial device. It just hasn't impressed me. And if it's not going to impress me, it's certainly not going to impress a skeptic. So I believe they're there. I believe that we have an opportunity maybe at some point in time of defining what they are. But you have to find it consistently in people. There has to be a function assigned to it. So it's a really difficult process of being basically claiming that it's extraterrestrial in origin. The composition has to be different, but then it has to be consistent within various people. You can't just pick something out of somebody's body and say it's extraterrestrial in origin. It just doesn't work that way, not from a scientific standpoint. So one of the big things that they are missing is the function of it. And here's another question. Has anybody thought of, should we be taking these things out anyway? Right? What's the moral responsibility here? Oh gosh, yeah, we're going to be getting into that one. But really, how about this? As a government agent, I now decided that these alien implants do represent a possible threat, so therefore, get on the table, I'm going to start taking them out if I find them in you. I mean, that's exceedingly dark, but my point is this, is that we should really start thinking about, hey, before we start investigating this process, maybe we should sit down and discuss some policies around how we should treat people who've had encounter experiences. How we should respect their rights, how we should respect your rights in that process. So really at this point in time, we don't have a defined structure of the implants, we don't have a defined composition for them, or a specific function that we can actually link to it, so we don't know. But they're there. They're probably biological in design and probably biological in origin. So in other words, they've somehow manufactured it, put it in there, but it looks very much like a biological part of our body. So it'd be extremely difficult for us to basically define it. We're dealing with technologies that are millions of years more advanced, but my guess is, it's going to be very difficult. I think it's still possible that we can find them, and maybe one way to determine how extensive this is happening within the population, but it's going to be a big challenge for us to do it. So I'm not saying don't give up on it. I'm saying that we just have to define what we're going to do in that area. I'm certainly one not for removing them, though. I got to tell you that right now. I wouldn't be developing a policy that would be in favor of removal of the implants, which, of course, makes it difficult then, I guess, to analyze them. But we really don't know. There's been some attempt to try and estimate how many people have had contact. In my instance, if I had feelings of paralysis when I was younger, when I was going to sleep and those types of things, that was definitely linked to the extraterrestrials. So it was what I'd call one of the breadcrumbs that they left me with, of being able to understand that I've had contact with them in the past. So I would have to say that paralysis is certainly one of those things. If you've ever experienced going to sleep or in bed or waking up, I think that's really a strong indication that you've had, an extraterrestrial contact. But other than that, I don't know. And no one really does. But here's a little interesting antidote. The extraterrestrials are contacting people, they're interacting with human beings, and they're letting human beings know that there's some medical component to this interaction. Okay, so we need to, whatever's going to happen, we should define it with a time frame. So what I did is I realized that if you were born in 1945, well, actually in 1945, the average life expectancy was 65 years of age, which it would have taken you to this year. This is the average life expectancy. Right now, the average life expectancy is about 75 years of age. So we could look at basically 2020. So somewhere between 2010 and 2020, I think something pretty significant is going to happen. Because if you're allowing people to remember these encounters, you look at the very oldest person in that group and you say, holy smokes, it must mean it's going to happen within their lifetime. Well, when does their life end? Somewhere around 2020, approximately. So we don't have a lot of years. This is like 10 years. So my thinking is they're allowing people to remember for a very specific reason. We just don't know what that reason is, but it's going to become apparent within the next 10 years. So the oldest multiple abductees, 1992, 59 years old with a life expectancy of 75 years of age would have brought them to about 2010. So like I'm saying, 2010 to basically 2020 is the time period that is going to be of extreme interest for all of us. This is going to happen fast. We're a small group of people here this evening. In 5 years, we could be looking at thousands in auditoriums, trying to understand what's actually happening and what's going on. One of my worries is that governments are going to be throwing money around. God, do they ever throw money around? Do they? Yeah. With any sense of what they're doing? My worry is that they'll be putting money into this and it won't be going in the right places for the right reasons. And an only way to make and prevent that from happening is that you have to be able to be prepared. God, I know you're going to hate to hear this. You have to be prepared to engage governments. They have to know what to do. They have to know what the right thing is to do. And they'll need to have somebody tell them. And I don't want it to be the military. Right? So an evolved consciousness is really what we're dealing with here. Forget about the technology part of it. Think about it from an evolved consciousness standpoint. And that changes the rules as well. So I believe that the secrecy, the whole idea around secrecy around the UFO phenomena is falling apart. You know, it's in tatters right now. Around 50% of people basically in the United States already believe that the phenomenon is real. If you go to Great Britain, it's 80%. So, which is also intriguing, because the weight of evidence, the principle of weight of evidence demands that we take some form of action. In other words, if you have a lot of evidence, it demands that you take some form of action. The precautionary principle is a principle, a scientific principle that we use in science all the time, particularly in environmental sciences. And it states that even in cases where the scientific evidence seems contradictory, the precautionary principle demands that we move towards some form of action, because the risks of doing something outweigh the risks of doing nothing. Think about that. So we need, just because there's still controversy around the UFO phenomenon, does it really make sense that we do nothing? No. We have to do something. We attempt to establish world peace after each world war. That's a fact. What's it going to take for us to have world peace? Maybe a third world war. I hate to be grim about this, but look at us, you know? Look at how humanity learns. But there was a time when all the world wanted peace. The only problem is we left it up to military people to try and get that peace for us. Now, in all fairness, I mean, that's what happens, right? But you're never going to get lasting peace in those situations. Will they directly intervene to prevent us from destroying ourselves? I've had that question asked of me. And I said, seemingly very average people are being contacted. You know, you're nothing special, you just get contacted. You or someone close to you has had or will have contact. Almost assured. It certainly means your children will know more about this than we currently do. Now, many government officials prefer to be ignorant about the UFO phenomenon because they don't want to know. They simply just don't want to know. So where do we go from here? And I'm not going to play this clip because we are running a little bit over time. Oh, we do have time? Okay. Well, actually, there's even a better clip. But in this instance, had to do with the Phoenix Lights. And Cy Fymington, which is the state governor at the time, found himself, and I've been in emergency situations. I've been surrounded in situations when I've been in the government. We've been dealing with a crisis. We've had people killed. We're sitting around. We're trying to, I shouldn't say sitting around. We're standing around answering phones, dealing with calls as they're coming in. We are in crisis mode. And decisions have to be made, period. He finds himself, as governor, absolutely inundated with calls about this extraterrestrial craft that has just gone over his city, parked itself over his city in the middle of the night. He's got panicked calls. He's got the media pounding on his door. And he's got no one telling him what he should do. I don't care. If you and I were governor and we were in that situation, it would be a very, very difficult situation to be in. So he thought he could do the only thing he should do. I got to quell the idea of panic. That's my job. My job as state governor is to quell the idea. So he tells everybody, hey, you know what? Let's make fun of this. We'll bring in a guy dressed up as an alien and say it's no big deal. I'm not mad at him. I'm not mad at this at all. It's completely understandable. Now, I don't approve of the decision, but I can understand why he did it. But here's something even bigger. When I looked at it, I said, what a missed opportunity. Shouldn't we have run to his office with something in hand and saying, we've been preparing for this, this is how you deal with it. This is how you communicate to the public, this is how you reduce fear, this is how you restore trust. This is how you handle it. There is science behind this, believe it or not. There's actually good science behind this. So if you ever had to declare an emergency, you might be surprised that the state governor or the local mayor may in fact actually have the ability to declare a state of emergency. So the actual state governors and mayors actually have a lot of power when it comes to emergencies. Now I'm going to give you the most idyllic situation. Ideally, the government should do the following. it's going to have to establish trust. Who has trust in the government these days? Not a lot of people. Announcing UFOs are real is the best thing that they can do. Absolutely the best thing that they could do. Promote transparency. You can't do it with the military, but you can do it around the investigation of the UFO phenomenon. And you're going to have to advise the public on what the public can do and should do. And you're going to have to develop a plan. This is absolutely fundamental. We know that there's a lot of people already that don't trust the government. So, the overriding goal for UFO communications is to communicate with the public in ways that restore trust. How do we know this? Well, there was a little group of people that got together and started worrying about biological hazards. In other words, what would happen if somebody let go of a biological bomb in New York City? How do you deal with the public in that situation, or a dirty bomb, or biohazards, right? How do you deal with the public? How do you inform the public? Well, in fact, the Center for Risk Communication has done a lot of work on this already, and they found that the evidence shows that the longer officials withhold worrisome information, the more frightening the information will seem when it is revealed, especially when it's revealed by an outside source, by somebody else, other than the government. This is clear scientific proof that the idea of fear and being worried about it is ridiculous. The policies that they have right now are totally out of date with what we know. Evidence also shows that the public panic is rare. And in fact, it's most rare when people have been candidly informed. I'm not making this up. And this is not about the UFO phenomenon. This is about dealing with people dying in the streets. Well, why in the heck are we holding back on the UFO reality? You know, the government needs to address it in a more responsible fashion. Now, they can announce that UFOs are real. They can put a communication together. It's probably going to be the most important thing they've ever done in this area. It's the most important communique that they will do. And it's wise then that the government, not the military, announce UFOs are real as early as possible, and this will reduce the rumors and misinformation. People are more likely to overestimate risks if the information is withheld, which makes totally good sense. If the government's not telling me, oh my God, you know, how bad is this? This must be horrible. So the thing is that, you know, you can't withhold information, or you shouldn't. Announcing UFOs are real, the risk of providing inaccurate information. Let's say we don't know everything about the UFO phenomenon. We just don't. Heck, I've been studying this for 20 some odd years. I've had actual encounters, and there's still lots I don't know about it. So if I was providing information, I could make a mistake. Risks of providing inaccurate information can be minimized with the appropriate communication message. You know, just be honest about it. We're still researching it, we're still looking at it, but this is what we know to date. I think shattering our very limited perceptual view of this reality will be very easy. However, developing a greater human understanding of our true place in this universe is going to be very difficult. In transparency, you're going to have to show a system that the public can trust. And boy, what a long road to hoe on that one. Because there's so many people right now that don't trust what's going on. If you get government funding, people will start looking at you and saying, well, okay, so are you linked to the government? Are you providing us with any information? How can I trust you? Should I even call you? It's going to be very, very difficult. The public, basically, the UFO communication message should include information about what the public can do. Just announcing UFOs are real isn't going to be good enough. You're going to have to put something in place about what individuals can do for themselves. You're also going to have to be entitled to information that affects their lives and their families. You're going to have to make decisions about what information the public gets, and you have to tell the public what they can do, and it may help actually reduce their fear and their uncertainty when they have an opportunity to participate. So decisions and actions of officials have more effect on trust and public risk perception than communication. It's one thing to say don't worry, and then it's another thing to say don't worry and then jump into your bunker, right? So if you're going to be a leader, you have to lead. Planning itself, I see that late communications to the public regarding the reality of UFOs are really not doomed to failure. I think it's kind of late right now. It's not doomed to failure, but it's going to require a lot more effort to obtain the same kind of results that the government's going to want to do. Now, there is another way. Of course, we can develop a plan that's proposed to help local and state governments. We can prepare to help them essentially help themselves. So right now what we're seeing is that there's a movement to approach local governments, because they have a lot of power actually, even on emergency planning, and start looking at, for example, the ET Commission and the Initiatives 300. I would go about it a little different way. I would suggest that we look at a UFO crisis center. Now, if you've never heard of that term before, I know you're going to hear about this in the future. And there's a lot of advantages to going to a UFO crisis center than just setting up a UFO research group or anything along those lines. And you're probably going to have to link yourselves into a mental health group as well. And there's obvious reasons for that. But you're opening yourselves up to huge amounts of funding opportunities if you go down through a UFO crisis center. There's lots of crisis centers in the greater part of LA. And not only that, it also provides a way that the government can show that they're actually demonstrating some responsibility in this area. If they're worried about public panic, then a UFO crisis center kind of makes sense. If you want grants, then, and along mental health grants, then again, a UFO crisis center kind of makes sense. But of course, the phenomenon doesn't actually follow the rules of what we thought, right? It's a very unusual phenomenon. You're on the front lines of this stuff. You are absolutely on the front lines. Don't let anybody tell you different. If you're here tonight, there must be something in you that is telling you that this is important. Listen to it. It's absolutely important. This is not made up. This is an ultimate reality. The more that you educate yourself about it, like you're doing tonight, the more likely you are to have an easier time of it. So even educating yourself, I think, is the best thing that you can do for yourselves. This is one little thing I'm going to just show you, because this is such a poignant kind of contact. This is the stuff that these children were exposed to. And I want you to get a sense of what these kids felt, what these kids, their feelings through this process. And what's also interesting is you should be asking yourself questions like, why were these beings just interacting with these children? Why not the adults? Why were the beings more attracted to the children than they were the adults? Is it an age thing? What was going on? And also, if the beings are here helping, why is there a desire for these beings maybe to take a person with them? It's not an evil thing. I think it's a sense of, look, I have to help you. You need to come with me. I need to show you something, or I need to help you in some way. I think those are the things that sometimes get misconstrued, that people get afraid of being taken aboard. I mean, I don't blame people for being afraid of taking aboard. I'm still afraid of it, for God's sakes. But we have to understand those feelings. I'll just put on this video just for a second.
This little man got out ahead on a black suit.
At the Ariel Primary School, 62 children came into contact with what they say were alien creatures.
They were very slim, the suit was black, but it was the eyes that was frightening.
A large number of children, all with the same apparent story.
Why would 62 children lie?
Celebrated Harvard professor John Mack interviewed the young eyewitness.
This is a school where they still give the belt for lying.
It was silver, and the ring around it was red.
It was red. Did light come from the whole thing, or
There were lights on.
It is John Mack.
along the edge there? How many of the strange beings did you see?
I saw one over here. They had eyes like that, and they were kind of just like looking at us. They were like kind of astonished at what we were. Felt scared.
You felt scared? What was scary about it?
Well, I felt scared because I've never seen such a person like that before.
They experienced very powerful encounters with these beings and were left with the rather disturbing fact that this seems to be what it is, and it seems to have no other psychiatric explanation.
Mack feels the children did not experience a mass delusion, but they believe the aliens had an ominous message.
Okay, what do you imagine is his reason for visiting Earth?
I think it's about something that's going to happen.
Something's going to happen.
What I thought was maybe the world's going to end. Maybe they're telling us the world's going to end. I think they want people to know that we're actually making harm on this world and we mustn't get too technology.
How did that get communicated to you?
I don't really know, but it just popped up in my head.
Solution.
He never said anything. It's just that the faces, the eyes, they looked horrible.
And the eyes, the horrible look, had that information that you just told me?
Yes.
In Africa, media exposure to aliens or UFOs is limited.
Now, the people in Africa don't have television. They might have a radio, but I can tell you the media don't deal with UFOs there. But nervous of it. So where would they pick it up? Is it a mass telepathy?
The children maintain a belief in what they saw and felt.
If someone were to say, well, you know, you just have a lively imagination and you made this up, what would you say?
I haven't been influenced by any of my friends. I have.
And she goes on to say, I've seen what I've seen. So, thank you. When I look at the faces of these children, these are our responsibilities. They're our responsibilities. This is the new world that's going to be growing up behind us. You know, I think we have the ability and we have the power, and certainly we have the means to make this a better world for them. And part of that process is going to be understanding this whole UFO phenomenon and not ridiculing people as a result of it and their experiences. We just have to have a much better understanding of that process. So I do see a UFO crisis center in the future. Maybe this is the first time you're ever going to hear it, but I guarantee it's not going to be the last time. I see so many benefits to going this way and going this direction, and certainly being able to provide a much better understanding about our current knowledge base, which is fairly limited, I have to confess. And of course, you could have an org chart along those lines as well. You'll have to have a board of directors and set that whole process up. I'm not going to get into that. But I think that, again, the UFO Crisis Center, you can apply for federal, state, and local agencies and nonprofit organizations for money, and there's grant applications which can be linked to emotional stress, mental illness, and crisis interventions, etc. So there's a huge advantage to going down that particular road. I believe that if there is going to be a new world, it will be our generation that will have the greatest difficulty living in it. There's been a lot of martyrs, I would say, that have led and have risked their careers and a number of other things, even maybe their lives, in their discovery and trying to shed light, essentially, into this very, very mysterious area. John Mack, I think, is one of my heroes, I'd have to say, in that area. He's just done such tremendous work. I'm not able to reconcile with those who think that the phenomena is completely evil. I can't reconcile that because I know that's not the truth. But I can certainly appreciate the difficulties that some people have in relating their experiences in a way that is conducive for their continual development. In other words, it can really screw you up, right? So it's a difficult time, but I think we're up to it. I really believe we're up to it. We just need to put systems in place to support those people who are struggling with the phenomenon and prepare those who may actually have an encounter experience. I suppose if I was in a situation that I was more prepared for, I might have done a little bit better with it. I'd have to say, you know, it did knock me off my rocker a little bit, because it takes a while to get your feet back on the ground, more or less, when you have these types of experiences. I want you to know that you made a difference tonight. You certainly made a difference to me. Just coming here and listening to me and spending the time to make the effort to drive here and to such an important thing that's going to be evolving. You have to continue to educate yourself. I'm not the only guy out there, obviously, but you have to really use your own sense of discretion when you're looking and listening to people. You know, keep your feet solid on the ground, but keep pushing forward and encouraging those to research this area. So coming here tonight makes a big difference. It's part of changing the world. And it's always going to be nice. I think you're going to look back on this a couple of years from now and go, wow, you know what? I remember when. You know, there was a small eclectic group of people that did this. I think it's so important. Again, this is not really an introduction that we're dealing with. This is an intervention. We're not to be fearful of that process, but we are, I think, to be compassionate. We're to understand people's fears around it, and we are trying to work towards an understanding for everyone. I'd like to thank you very much for this opportunity again, and I wish you good night and good speed.